French jetons. And I make that, well, let me extend a couple of caveats. Number one, I'm not an expert on French jetons. 25 years ago, when I got actively re-involved with collecting and research, I collected several different topics, including French jetons, as a way to determine where I wanted to concentrate my interest. And so I collected them off and on for about 10 years and then decided to move on to other things. But given the fact that we have a number of Condor collectors in our organization, I thought this would be a good opportunity to give equal time to the French. Um, Now, a lot of things are called jetons nowadays, poker chips, a variety of different kinds of tokens, marriage tokens, and so forth. But I am focusing on the jetons that were used on counting boards, and in particular the royal jetons, which became important in French society and culture. But the counting board came about around 1200, and counters to use on counting boards were minted between 1200 and 1800. Most of those um, were produced in Germany, in Nuremberg, um, until we reached a certain point in French royalty where they wanted to sort of drive out the effects of the Germans. But I've got two pictures here, the Florence counter from 1300, um, a counting board. If you look at the illustration, a counting board is how the vast majority of people conducted their business, their administrative accounting, their home accounting, etc. There were very few people that were educated to the point where they could actually do mathematical operations on paper. So if you think of the counting board as an abacus, counting boards were prevalent throughout Europe. Um, Almost every household had one, in addition to government agencies and businesses. So this took millions of counters to meet the demand of what people needed to do accounting. Uh, Again, with the majority of them being produced in Nuremberg. There are a number of ways to collect French jetons. You could collect by the ruler, and in time in France, each administrative unit began to issue their own jetons, so you could collect them by administrative unit. And over time, many of the provinces, their forms of government began issuing jetons. Um, I have, as I step through my collection to show you examples, there's a catalog number down here. Um, I call it Faradent. I'm not a French speaker, so that's probably not the correct pronunciation. But he was a major collector of French jetons, and in the early 1900s issued a three-volume catalog and a couple of supplements after that. He catalogs over 13,000 French jetons. That includes varieties, mules, and different alloys. Jetons were primarily struck in brass, copper, and silver. The brass and copper were used on counting boards. The silver played a role in French society among wealthy people and paying off important people. And there were some that were struck in gold, but those that were struck in gold were always struck to present to the king. Um, Henry the Fourth, I'm starting here. The Latin inscription on the obverse reads, "He looks to heaven." This was struck as a Nuremberg token, and it's where most of the early tokens in France came from. Beginning with Louis the XIV and on, it became highly controlled and a product of the mint. In Louis the XIII, that was sort of in a transition period. In this jeton in copper, on the obverse is the king on horseback riding over his enemies in the field. And above him is the Virgin Mary and a crown in the clouds. And the Latin inscription reads, "Piety in the invincible right hand." This is showing the power of the King of France. This is a mule with 1638 and 1639. The reverse shows a vineyard worker trimming the vines in the field, and the inscription reads, "I remove what is excess." Uh, One way to, as I said, one way to collect French jetons is by rulers. Another way is by the images that appear on the reverse, and they're often allegorical. They often refer to various myths and tales, and I'll point some of them out. When I was beginning my collecting and trying to learn more about them, I was attracted to images that I found uh, interesting. So Louis the XIV is when um, uh, things began to change in France. Nuremberg jetons were uh, outlawed. This one happens to be from Nuremberg, but the Louis the XIV sort of took over. One of his administrative units came up with the designs if you wanted to produce a jeton, and the Paris Mint struck them for you. But this one is early in that period, and it's produced by Nuremberg. And one of the features of the Nuremberg jetons is they're generally thinner and less well done than the French jetons. And this one has tranquility on the reverse. Louis XIV, 1692. This is copper, heavily worn. So if you remember, copper and brass tokens were actually used as counters. Um, and this one shows Louis on the obverse, and the reverse is celebrating the victory over the Dutch fort in Namur. I picked this one up because I was interested in um, city views and port views, for example. Now, most copper and brass jetons run around $20, plus or minus. Um, so when you get into silver, they can be more expensive, but you can build uh, quite an impressive collection of jetons for relatively low cost. This again is another jeton that was obviously well used on a counting board. Louis the XIV. This celebrates the renewal of the Swiss alliance. And on the reverse is the king with a dauphin by his side. That's his young son who will become king. And then the representatives of the Swiss on the other side of the altar. Um, Louis the XIV and Maria Theresa marriage. This is celebrating the marriage. There's a number of variations on this, but this particular one shows the entry into Paris of the Cardinal Chigi, the legate who performed the marriage. Some of these tokens have to do with the royal family, and this one is in silver. Anna Maria Christina Bavaria, a new glory added in the sky, and so this is celebrating her marriage. It's in silver, so this was not issued as a token to be used on a counting board, but people of in the royal family, people important to the royal family, people who would have been invited to the marriage would receive purses with maybe 50 to 100, depending upon their status of these silver tokens. And silver tokens were not money, but you could turn a silver token into the mint in exchange for cash. Uh, as I said, Nuremberg tokens were illegal, but they do appear in French society, and this is one from Nuremberg, and you can see the quality is not quite the same of what you've been looking at as portraits so far. This is Louis the 15th, 1744, and on the reverse is a statue with uh, the king and the inscription, the best of rulers. Another way to collect is by the various provinces. So Burgundy, Lyon, and other provinces, they issued, and sometimes towns, they would issue at New Year's uh, jetons to people in the government and sometimes in the populace. So copper jetons were handed out in larger numbers because they were used on counting boards. This one is celebrating the birth of the grandson of Louis the 14th, and on the reverse is a ram on the zodiac, and the inscription reads, "One of the gods bears my name." Uh, so that's referring to his father. Um, the mayors of Dijon issued their own jetons on an annual basis. This one is commemorating the new mayor of Dijon. And the reverse reads, "One sleeps, the other awakes." And this is commemorating the death of the previous mayor and the appointment of the new mayor. And again, I find these intriguing by the inscriptions on the the uh, illustrations on the reverse. This is unlisted, um, and that's because there's so many thousands of jetons that despite the quality of Ferdinand's collection, there were things that didn't necessarily make it into his hands. The obverse is listed, the reverse is not. But this again is an elector from the states of Burgundy, and this silver jeton is commemorating his election, and it would have been handed out uh, to a variety of people uh, at the time of his election. And again, it's silver, so it wasn't meant for counting boards. This is a way of recognizing somebody with something of value. 1668, this would be used on a counting board. This is Burgundy celebrating the conquest of the Franks. Uh, and on the obverse, the Latin inscription says the three orders of Burgundy will be faithful. In the reverse, you see the king dressed as a Roman, the palm on one hand and the Statue of Victory in the other hand. Behind him sits France, and in front of him is kneeling Burgundy, presenting the palm to him, congratulating him on his conquest. And the Latin inscription reads, "Louis the 14th, who saved Burgundy by the conquest of the Frank." One area that I did focus on myself after a visit to Paris, because I was taken with Paris, as most people in the world are, um, were the jetons of Paris. And there's one large catalog that just focuses on Paris itself and um, the various agencies that existed within Paris. This is a jeton of the provost of merchants, sort of like the mayor of Paris. On the reverse is City Hall, and the Latin inscription reads, "There radiates pride." On the obverse is the coat of arms of Paris. and that appears in various forms with the sailing ship. Another provost from 1623, the star of Caesar accompanies him, and that's a lily blooming in the sunlight. Um, Now we get into some of the silver ones. The Provost of Merchants, 1776. That's a familiar date to most of us. And this would be a personal token distributed to secretaries and other people that served him and other dignitaries within Paris. And on the reverse is a very fancy version of the arms of Paris. The obverse is the coat of arms of the individual. One of the administrative units were a group of men who advised the king, the King's Council. This is from Louis the XIV. Again, it's copper, so these would have been distributed in large numbers to the families and friends of the King's Council to be used as counters on counting boards. Um, and on the reverse, the inscription reads, "It reappears with new fragrance." And that's a lily blooming in the falling rain. Uh, the obverse is the motto of the King's Council, "Nothing without counsel," in Latin. Um, there are two different administrative units related to the army. The Ordinaire de Guerres was the administration of the army, the war administration of the army. The other one was the actual financial unit that funded the army. And this particular token in silver was one of the prides of my collection. They are popular, if not somewhat rare. On the reverse is what many people over time have called flying saucers, proving that flying saucers exist. Um, and if you have any doubt, a winery here in Santa Cruz County has a label with a flying saucer over a French village that passed a law several hundred years ago outlawing flying saucers from landing in the village. And in fact, no flying saucers ever landed in that village. But this is actually an illustration that relates back to the Trojan War when God cast down a shield to protect the troops. And what is interpreted as a flying saucer is actually a shield. Um, and the inscription reads, I gotta move just a minute. I screwed myself up. Opportune appearance is what it reads. Um, as I said, this was one of the prides of my collection, and a year ago I got introduced to my collection where a collector in England saw this image on my Flickr site and wanted to buy it. I agreed to sell it to him, and it's featured in his new book on mystical tokens. So it's when I decided that some things were ready to pass on to people who cared about them more. Uh, this 1683 Louis XIV, this would be an exception to the rule about no jetons coming from Nuremberg, because this was the head of the war administration. So it was a personal token distributed by him, and that had to have approval from Louis XIV for him to actually order them. Uh, and the reverse is a pomegranate tree with fruit under the rayed sun. Um, and the inscription reads, it gives fruits and garlands. And below it says, the Ordinaire des Guerres, Paparel Treasurer. So this was a personal token And copper, again, these were probably given out in large numbers to use on counting boards. And if you notice as we go through these, often there will be a sun in the illustrations on the reverse. And if you remember, Louis XIV was the Sun King. So that's another symbol of royalty. Another one that I have still in my collection, having visited the Louvre, I was intrigued with the Louvre, and this particular jeton was issued by the administrative group called the Buildings of the Kings. They were the architects that designed the buildings and oversaw construction and reconstruction. This is a silver jeton. The obverse inscription reads, Order generates beauty. This is marking the demolition of the first colonnade of the Louvre. And he did that to augment and install a decorated pediment. And the picture here is the work is the image of the work after it was done. The Royal Treasury, um, the obverse, Louis XIV, by the grace of God, King of the Franks and Navarre. On the reverse is a porcupine, and the inscription reads, An eternal harvest of traits, the Treasure Royal. The image of the porcupine represents the responsibility of the royal treasury to finance wars. And when the porcupine launches its spines, they regrow. And so this is an illustration uh, representing the ability of the treasury to both provide finance for war and to restock the treasury to continue to provide that service. Um, a silver jeton, Louis XV. This is from the Royal Treasury as well. And it shows Vulcan working at a foundry. And the inscription reads, Peaceful Peace Works. This obverse of a young Louis XV is a fairly rare design showing him as a youthful king. And all this is silver. I doubt that it was used as a counter. It obviously was carried as a pocket piece for some time. I like this one because it shows the hand minting process. Another one from the Royal Treasury, 1739. The reverse image is a palm tree and a bay tree, again under the sun, which would be representing the royalty shining down on France. And the inscription reads, Fruits grow under this star. Another Royal Treasury piece. The reverse is the Nile lying turned, holding a cornucopia, and beside him is a crocodile. And the inscription reads, Always preserving the treaty. Again, I like this one because of the Nile. And whenever you see these vessels with water flowing out, that's representing water coming out of a river. Um, and the crocodile, so this is clearly representing the Nile in Egypt. The accounting chamber. Um, this is Louis XIV, 1700. In the reverse, there's a pitcher watering the field, and the inscription read, It pours forth. Now, remember, as when Louis XIV, they started to take more control over the jetons. So these images on the reverse of the jetons are meant to reinforce the royalty, what they do for the country, um, the power of the king. Another one from the counting chamber. This is Louis the 15th. And on the reverse is a statue of the god Hermes, a formal garden, and in the distance is an aqueduct. And the inscription reads, Preserve, not destroy. Louis the 14th, the first company of merchants. Um, the On the reverse, on top of the post or tree is the French rooster, and he has grabbed in his talons the golden fleece, and below are a lion and leopard representing England. And this has to do with conflict with Spain, and the inscription reads, The effort of the rooster tears away the conflict with Spain. The Paris Mint, that's another administrative unit, and they were responsible for striking jetons. This one I liked. It's another young portrait of Louis the 15th. And the reverse um, is a screw press in all its detail, the coins falling down out of the press, and around it are baskets filled with coins, and on the right are tools used in the minting process. Um, and The reverse inscription reads both law and weight. And I diverge a little bit into another administrative regional unit. This is a jeton of Chartres, the provost and advisors of Chartres. O city, your subjects give you great praise. And I was excited to achieve this one because at the time I was collecting medieval deniers from this area. And if you look at these basants or these figures on the coat of arms of Paris, they are actually early coins. And here's a coin from 975 showing you that design. So this is an homage to the city's history, but I think by the time this jeton was struck and the coat of arms of Chartres was designed, that they had forgotten that these were actually coins turned on the side. And so you can see here, here's the top of the crown, here's the base of the crown, the face, that's the face, um, and where the mouth and chin is on the later one, and I do not have one in my collection. These design down here was replaced with a fleur-de-lis, and so uh, that design has been turned on the edge. Um, Getting back to Paris, the university was very important in Paris. This is a jeton issued by the Grand Masters of the University of Paris. It features Charlemagne. On the reverse is the coat of arms of the Grand Masters, and the hand holding the letter here represents the postal function that the Grand Masters performed within the university. And in the exurge down here, the Latin reads, the Grand Masters of the University of Paris. The Academy of Sciences, that's astronomy, mathematicians, history, botany, zoology, chemistry, are all within the Academy of Sciences. And these jetons would have been given out at the annual meetings of the faculty. So each faculty member would receive a purse with the silver jetons. It's both an honor and a form of payment. Like I said, you could take these silver jetons to the mint and turn them in for money. You couldn't do that with the copper, but you could with the silver. Uh, and this is Pallas on the reverse, surrounded by the scientific instruments and specimens. The inscription reads, "Invented and perfected," and below it exerts the Royal Academy of Sciences. University of Paris Department of Philosophy. Um, this one I like. It's got beautiful toning on it. Again, it's silver. On the obverse is the north facade of the Sorbonne Chapel, as seen from the Court of Honor. That would still look like this today if you were standing in the Court of Honor. And on the reverse is a Bible above the inscription. Sacred scripture is substituted for philosophical curriculum. And they the philosophy they taught was straight out of the scriptures. So we're going to jump now to Lyon, another regional area. This is the Lyon Chamber of Congress. Um, the Rhone and here I'm going to butcher the name of the river, Saône. The Rhone and the Saône mixing water from their urns. So these represent the two rivers. The urns are the rivers flowing out together. Um, and on the reverse, again, are the two rivers. Um, in the distance is a mermaid holding a shell and spreading coins on the shore. And the inscription reads, "Rich with its production, the 10 commissioners, Lyon officers to conduct trade." This is again another one that the imagery really attracted me when I picked this up. I was also interested in Lyon because did have a Roman coin from Augustus with the altar of Lagundum on it that stood on the point of land where the two rivers came together. And now, many years later, um, 1750 years later, the altar of Lagundum appears on this jeton. It's the Lyon Academy of Sciences and Belles Lettres. The Athenaeum of Lyon, the Temple of Athena, is restored. The arms of the city, again, the two rivers flowing together. And on the obverse is uh, the altar of Lagundum. The Lyon Corporation of Clothiers. Uh, Again, the arms of Lyon in a variety of forms with the two rivers and a line between them. And I love this illustration on the reverse, the vessel of the Argonauts coming to conquest and seize the golden fleece suspended from a branch of a tree, and it's defended by a dragon whose tail wraps up around the tree. And the inscription reads, "It enriches, clothes, and adorns." And we know a little bit more about this, and that this was a dual production of both the corporation and the monastery related to the corporation. Uh, that pouches of 60 tokens were distributed to the treasurers of the organizations, the secretaries, the messengers, as well as former office holders within that administrative unit of Lyon. Um, Back to Paris with a Nuremberg production. And again, like I say, they do slip in. This is Louis the 16th. And I was attracted to this one because of the view of the The city with Notre Dame and the towers of the 14 parish churches. And I've got a picture. Oops. I've got a picture here of that same scene taken from the same location, so you can see the engraving and the presentation compared to the actual view today. The French Revolution brought an end to the royal jetons, and they were ordered to be turned in and to be destroyed. Up until 1800, counting boards were still in use across France, and most of the people using the counting boards were women managing the family accounts. But with the revolution, the jetons were ordered because they had taken on a social role and a role promoting the royal family and the royal administration of France. These are two cliches or galvanos meant to tell that story. My pair are conjoined, and these high rims meant that they probably at one time had a glass dome on each side to protect the surfaces. The one side is the return of the king to Paris, and of course, we know what happened to the royal family after the return of Paris. And the other time side is the siege of the Bastille. Uh, these are not jetons, they are 85 millimeter shells, but they signify the end of the realm of the royal jetons. For references, Faradents, Jettons, and Marot, these are church tokens. It's a three-volume set, and like I say, there's a couple of addendums issued to them. The story that I've been drawing from is from the American Numismatic Society, um, Old Regime France and its jetons, a pointillist history in numismatics. It is not a catalog, although there are many jetons illustrated within it. It is the history of how jetons became a part of society and culture in France, and each of the units, administrative units, and regional territories that issued jetons and their role in that production. And others rely upon, I move around and I switch slides. Uh, Michener's, it's a three-volume set. They're quite thick, jetons, medals, and tokens. This volume two is the Low Countries in France. It does catalog many jetons, uh, only a fraction of those that exist, but it is a useful guide into what is available. And with that, I will stop sharing and open the floor up to questions.